911. Police, ambulance?
Yes, some guy just broke in with a hammer.
He broke into your house?
Yes, I've never seen him before.
Alaska, 2016. A man with a hammer in his hand walks with one goal: to do justice. But he is not a hero. This is the story of Jason Vukovich, and of the monsters he decided to hunt. Jason Vukovich's story begins with darkness. He was born in Anchorage, Alaska on June 25, 1975, and grew up in an environment marked by physical and sexual abuse perpetrated by his stepfather, Larry Lee Fulton. Fulton adopted him at the age of 4, and according to Vukovich, used nightly prayer sessions as an excuse to sexually abuse him and his brother Joel. The aggressions included beatings with belts and whips. These abuses continued until he and his brother ran away from home at the age of 16. In 1989, Fulton was convicted of child abuse, but only received a 3-year sentence with probation, which allowed him to continue living with his victims. After escaping, Vukovich lived on the streets and accumulated criminal records for robberies, assaults, and drug possession in several states: Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and California. At 12 years old, Jason had already learned to hate. At 25, prison turned him into a survivor, but his true judgment was yet to come. According to his own words, violence marked him. "I learned early on that the world was a cruel place," he said later. But instead of curing himself, Vukovich vowed to fight back, attacking those he considered the monsters of society. Stay tuned because we have some news for you at the end of the video. All this rage will fall fiercely on its first victim, Andres Barbosa. Barbosa, 49 years old at the time of the attack, had previously been convicted of sexual abuse of a 13-year-old girl in 2006. Vukovich attacked him in his apartment with a hammer, fracturing his skull and leaving him in critical condition. A little publicized fact is that after recovering from Vukovich's attack, Barbosa was arrested again in 2020 for assaulting his partner, prompting criticism of his recidivism and the effectiveness of Alaska's sex offender supervision system. His second victim was Charles Albee, 55, who had a history of first-degree sexual assault, also against minors. At the time of the attack, he was living in a homeless shelter in Anchorage. Vukovich struck him with the hammer while he slept. Albee survived, but was left with severe sequelae. This case highlighted the vulnerability of sex offenders who, after serving time, end up in homelessness, a recurring problem in Alaska due to the lack of reintegration programs. His latest victim was Wesley Demarest, 61, had been convicted of attempted sexual abuse of a minor in 2012. Vukovich found him at the Anchorage Public Library and followed him home to attack him. Demarest was the only one who managed to partially defend himself, but still suffered facial fractures. Interestingly, Demarest and Vukovich had been cellmates briefly in the past, suggesting that Vukovich may have identified him as a target during that previous contact. A little-known fact about him is his explicit inspiration from the film Death Wish, 1974, starring Charles Bronson. Vukovich admitted that the film, which revolves around a man who becomes a vigilante after the murder of his wife and the rape of his daughter, directly influenced his decision to take justice into his own hands. This cinematic connection not only reveals how pop culture shaped his view of revenge, but also underscores the psychological justification he used to target registered sex offenders in Anchorage in 2016. Jason Vukovich's story is a hall of mirrors, reflections of pain, rage, and the darkest corners of human morality. He was a child the world abandoned, a man the system recycled, and a vigilante who weaponized his trauma against those he deemed deserving. But here's the bitter truth. Violence begets violence. Every swing of his fist was a scream from the boy who never got justice. Every victim he brutalized became proof that cycles of abuse don't end. They mutate. We can't ignore the uncomfortable parallels. Jason hunted predators, yet mirrored their cruelty. He demanded accountability, yet refused to surrender his own. And in the end, the court punished him the only way it knew how, with more years, more cages, more silence. His story isn't a call to vigilante justice, it's a warning. A warning that when we fail the vulnerable, when we prioritize punishment over healing, we don't prevent monsters. We create them. And sometimes, they wear the face of a victim. Vukovich has recently been released after more than a decade in prison, returning to a society still debating the complexities of his case. Please subscribe for more criminal behavior stories.